Hello and welcome to another episode of Shortcuts with Paul deMarco, the accelerated guitar method. Always practice slow, but definitely develop fast. So we've covered a few things on the last few weeks. We've looked at tuning and all the things we can learn from that. We'll draw from that today in today's lesson. We looked at chords as well and trying to grasp as much as we can from chords. And we're going to expand on that today, because we're going to talk about power chords. But before we go into power chords, we're going to learn a new chord. It may be new to you or it may not, but we're going to address it the same way as we addressed the E major and the E minor chord last time. So let's get into the first chord. So the chord that we're adding this week is a G major chord. Okay. Now traditionally it looks like this. Okay, so you're going to take your second finger, and that's going to play the the third fret on the low sixth string. Your first finger is going to play fret 2 on the adjacent string, so string number 5. And then your little finger, in this case, is going to play the top string, fret 3. You could use your third finger, but then your little finger's kind of loose, not got anything to do. Whereas if you play with your little finger there, you can do things with this third finger. Like for example, I like to add the third fret on the second string as well. And sometimes I'll lose that note there, especially on electric guitar, and you get a nice clear. But traditionally in a textbook, what you'll see is a G that looks like this. Now, a few things to remember, okay? Now, it's really important that you remember to fret correctly. Remember what that means. Get your finger as close to the fret that it's supposed to be fretting as possible. And that way you don't have to push. Remember, you're squeezing between your thumb and your finger. And make sure your fingers are standing up as best as possible to give it this nice clear sound. Sometimes I'll illustrate this by saying, for example, I don't know if you can see, but there are lines on the end of my fingers. If you find that you have lines after playing on the pad of your finger, then your finger's too flat, you're fretting it wrong. The line should be across the top or just past the top of your finger. That way you know. So what I would suggest you do, play a chord and do what I said don't do. Squeeze it tight, push your fingers down, and then have a little look, see where the lines are on your fingers. If they're on the ends of your fingers, then you know you're fretting it right. And you'll find that the chord will be clearer as well. So make sure you're fretting it correctly. Now, remember, it's important to recognise the root note of the chord. Now, do you remember what we said? The root note is going to be the first note that you strike when you strum the chord from the low strings up. Okay, so in this case, it's that fret 3 on the low string. Now, what's the name of the chord? It's a G major, which means the root note is going to be G. So in this case, fret 3 on the low E string is G. That's going to prove important later. So remember that. Fret 3 on the low string, the low E string, is a G note. And actually, if you add some of the knowledge that we looked at when we were talking about tuning last time, you also know that anything on the bottom string is the same on the top string. So the reason why we add this note at the top there is because that's also a G. G and a G. Now, a major chord is made up of 3 notes from the major scale: the root note, the fifth, and the major or minor third, in this case the major third. So where you'll find these in this chord, obviously there's the root, and there you'll find the major third. That's what makes it a major chord. So, happy or sad? Well, it's happy, isn't it? So that because it's a major chord. We talked about that. The mood that it gives you is a happy mood because it's a major chord. Now, we stressed that note there. Let me just add a little bit of emphasis to that. So that's a G. Let's put it in context. Now, from tuning, you know that bottom string is an E. You also know when you tune the A string, that fret 5 on that E string is also an A. Okay? What that means is, instead of you knowing E and A, which are 5 frets apart, you have a middle ground of the G. E, G, A. Now you may say you don't know the notes along the bottom string. It's good to learn them, but actually through learning chords and scales and things, you will find out some of those notes along the way. And I find that when you address it to context, when you address it to the chords that you already know, it sticks in your brain better. Having said that, it's still good to sit down and try and learn these notes along the way. But anyway, so far, so we got an E. We now know fret 3 is a G, and fret 5 is an A. So let's have a little look at the chord. Let's add it to the E minor chord that we played. Now they're actually related. E minor is the relative minor of G. And when we cover some scale ideas, you'll find that important. And when we're looking at chord patterns as well, you'll find that important. So remember, G, the relative minor of G is E minor. So E minor and G actually share the same notes. It's just that we order them differently, so that one sounds minor and one sounds major. Okay, so that's the G chord. Add that to the chord you already know. Now we're going to talk about power chords. Why are they called power chords? Well, they're called power chords because they are powerful. They're powerful in their simplicity. First of all, let's have a look at the shape, because you may find that you've tried bar chords and they're a challenge for you. Keep persevering, keep practicing, they will get easier. But power chords is kind of an in-between an open chord and a bar chord. It doesn't take the full strength of a bar chord, but does give you the power and the flexibility of what a bar chord is able to let you do. So let's have a little look. I'll tell you what, let's play a G power chord, seeing as we've just done the G major chord. So first of all, we're going to need a root note, right? So you'll know that fret 3 on that bottom string is a G. So play that with your first finger. Okay. Then what we need is, a power chord is made up of the root and the fifth. That's it really, it's 2 notes. We may play more than 2 notes when we're playing it, but actually, essentially, it is 2 notes. So the fifth is always positioned in the same place along this E string in relation to the root. It's always 1 string up, 2 frets forward. Now you may know from tuning, or you may remember from tuning, that note there tunes the string adjacent to it, and that string's the D string, making that a D note. So the 5th note in the scale of G is D. And that's the distance that they are apart. So 1 string up, 2 frets forward. Now essentially, there you have your power chord. Those 2 notes, first finger and third finger preferably. Now usually when we're playing a power chord, we'll also add the octave of the G. So it's a good time to talk about octaves. So an octave, just like the 5th, is always going to be in the same place when you're playing along this E string, and also on the A string as well. But in this case, along the E string, your octave is always going to be 2 strings up, but 2 frets forward as well, just like the 5th. So 2 strings up, 2 frets forward. Those 2 notes are both the same. They are both G, but this G is a full 12 chromatic notes higher. Do you remember we talked about an octave being 12 notes? 0 to 12 is your octave, and any note past that, so 3, 15. Well, the closer octave to it is going to be 2 strings up, 2 frets forward. Ooh. Now, octave's quite useful in a lot of styles of music, so we'll come across those along the way. But if we were to add that to our chord, now root, 5th, and then we're going to play the octave with our little finger. Now you may find in the open chords you've been using, you don't use your little finger much. So here's a good opportunity to do that. So let's play all those 3 strings together. Now what is important here, whilst you don't need to press down that first finger like you would do in a bar chord, it's good to let the underside of your first finger touch the higher strings, because it will just mute them. Because what we don't want to hear is this. We don't want those open strings. Cool chord, but we don't need it in this case. So it keeps it nice and clean, nice and simple. So we've got a root, we got 5th, and we got the octave. Still only 2 notes. We're playing 3 notes, you'll say, but actually 2 of the notes are the same, they're both G. Add the D, which is the 5th, and we've got our power chord. Now let's move it around like we did the other chords, and this is where this chord becomes really powerful. So if we move it 1 fret at a time, we get the same shape, new chord. So if that's a G, I'll tell you what, let's use notes that you already know. Let's go 2 frets forward to when we tune in the A string, you know that that's an A. Same shape, new chord. And we can do that all the way up the neck. Each time we move, same shape, new chord. Same shape, new chord. Same shape, new chord. Same shape, new chord, and so on. We can do that all the way along. Now when we were using the other chords, we also moved to the next string as well. Again, the great thing about this chord is the shape doesn't change. It's still root, 5th, and octave. So if we take this chord of G and we move it up to the next string, tell you what, let's use a note that you know. You know when we're tuning D, we play D note on that string. So we now got 3 chords out of this. We've got a G, we've got an A, and we've got a D. As you can see, we're already creating music, so you're starting to hear the power of this chord. So we've moved strings, we've moved frets, and it really can make a difference. So we can create some changes. So let's use those 3 chords and create a change. In fact, no, before we do that, let's just take 2 random chords. We'll start with a G, and we'll pick a number. Let's say, yeah. Let's say fret 8, and we're going to move between the 2, okay? Okay, so great. Let's try moving between two strings. So we'll start with a G, and I'll tell you what, let's do the same distance that we did before, but on the next string. So you can see it's really easy to come up with changes. I'll give you a few examples of songs that you may know. How about this? The Kinks, You Really Got Me, which is a great riff. Let's take this one. Green Day's American Idiot. There's so many different chord changes you can use using these power chords. It's great. Now, here's something to notice. we're only using 2 notes from the scale. Do you remember a chord was made up of the root, the fifth, and the major or minor third? Well, we haven't mentioned the major or minor third. Why? Because a power chord doesn't have one. It has no mood to it. It has no major or minor to it. It can be any chord. So let's say, for example, you didn't know an A chord, but you had a chord change which went from E minor to G to A, but you don't know A. Well, learn it or use a power chord. So E minor, G, A power chord, E minor. So it's great because it doesn't matter if the chord you were looking for was major or minor. You can put in a power chord there. Now, this isn't a substitute for learning those other chords by any means. It just may get you out of a situation where you need the chord and your brain just doesn't give you the chord at the time, or maybe you don't know it. So all you need to do is find the root note and you're on it. Now, remember we said it'd be good to name these chords along the string, but you might not know all the notes. Well, we've got a few, haven't we, to work with. We've got an E. So actually fret 12 is also an E. But I now know G and I know A. Well, actually that's enough to tell me what's going on in between, because I know my alphabet, and I know my alphabet goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So between E and G there's an F. So one of these two is an F. Now this is a bit that you're going to have to learn. Okay, your scale goes E, F, F sharp, G. So when I was playing the Kinks You Really Got Me, I was playing G and F, or rather F and G. If I was to play the Who's My Generation, it goes from G to F. So there you go. You now know E, F, F sharp, G. Well, you also know that that's A. And what's in the alphabet between G and A? Oh, hang on. A is the start of the alphabet. So what happens after G? Well, between G and A, there's another sharp. So you've got a G sharp or an A flat. So you've got E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. So there you go. You now know first 5 frets of that string. So come up with a change. Recognise that? Yep, it's the solo section of Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven. A, G, and F. So as you can see, loads and loads of potential with this power chord. So make sure that you're fretting it right. Try to say it as you play it. G5 or G power chord. A5, A power chord. F5, F power chord. And that will just put it in your brain a little bit better. So remember, practice slowly and cleanly, and you will progress faster. I have a little exercise that may help you learn this chord. And basically what you do is you play, starting from the F, play your power chord, move up a string, then forward a fret, then back down a string, then forward a fret, then up a string, then forward a fret, then down a string, and so on. So you're basically just going to go. And then just build up the speed of that. And then just keep practicing that. You can also do it in reverse. And it just gets your hand used to playing that chord a lot. So just practice it. Get used to it. It might be a little bit easier higher up the neck because the frets are closer together. And then gradually come down the strings until you can play it more comfortably. Keep practicing and it'll happen. So that's it for today. So until next time, make sure that you're practicing regularly. Make sure that you take your time. Do it slowly, and you will progress faster. Slow and clean always works better. So until next time, keep practicing, and I'll see you then. Thank you.